This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
In 1978, 19-year-old Gus Hoffman was accosted by a motorcycle gang in San Jose, California. For 10 years, his mother has haunted gang hangouts in a desperate attempt to find her son or his killers. In 1927, 2 weeks before Charles Lindbergh's famous Atlantic crossing, a pair of intrepid French aviators attempted the same flight. Some believe they made it, and aviation history will have to be rewritten. In 1987, Patsy Wright was killed by a lethal dose of strychnine in her cold medicine. Police believe the murderer was someone close to her. In 1942, the oil tanker Muskogee was sunk by a German U-boat. All hands were lost. 45 years later, the son of the Muskogee's captain has asked the Nazi U-boat commander to help locate the missing relatives of the men lost at sea. Tonight, 4 stories in which ordinary people are thrust into the most extraordinary circumstances, each needing one vital clue to solve a mystery. Perhaps someone watching tonight can help. Perhaps it's you. In 1977, Gus Hoffman was a popular 19-year-old in San Jose, California. He had a reputation as an excellent musician and a mechanical whiz. Gus was not a biker, but one of his hobbies was restoring vintage motorcycles, and he took great pride in his work. In October of 1977, Gus bought a 1966 Harley-Davidson Sportster. He spent 8 months and $4,000 restoring it to mint condition. The motorcycle became a source of conflict between Gus and his parents.
We didn't like it at all. My husband gave him an ultimatum. He said, either you go or the bike. I said, I don't want you to leave, Gus. I said, you gotta do something. And neither does your dad want you to leave. So he's just afraid that something's gonna happen to you. We don't want you to have that bike. He said, well, I'll just fix it up and I'll sell it. That's what he told us.
On July the 4th, 1978, Gus put the finishing touches on his motorcycle. He showed it off to his brother and told him he was taking the bike out for a short ride. Gus Hoffman's family would never see him again. When Gus did not return, his mother, Rose Hoffman, called the police to report her son missing. Because they could take no action until 48 hours had passed, she started to investigate on her own. This began a 10-year quest in which Rose Hoffman never stopped trying to find out what had happened to her son. Rose has asked that an actress portray her in recreating these most painful moments. When Gus didn't return, Rose canvassed the neighborhood. She questioned one of Gus's friends who worked at a nearby gas station.
But about 2 days ago, I saw him pull up on his motorcycle. There were these 2 other guys that were on choppers with him.
He said that he saw Gus riding by Meridian, and he said there was 2 motorcycles in back of him and a blue Monte Carlo. And he said the reason he recognized it was because these same 2 motorcycle guys came in to the gas station, and they were like real mean to him, and so he remembered them. And they had real long hair, and they were just real tough guys, guys that you don't fool around with.
A second witness later said that the 2 bikers had stopped Gus, argued, and threatened him with chains. When Gus pulled away, they roared after him, the blue Monte Carlo in pursuit. The two witnesses identified one of the bikers as Michael Hodges, a member of the Forgotten Few motorcycle gang. The other was Michael Stevenson, another member of the same gang.
If there was ever a person who you could say was a career criminal, the name would be Michael Stevenson. He's probably the most violent person that I've ever investigated.
The San Jose police did not have enough evidence to bring Stevenson and Hodges in for interrogation, so they began to question other gang members who knew the two men.
Yeah. We're with the San Jose police. Got a few questions to ask you.
All right. What's up?
Yeah, do you know Gus Hoffman by any chance?
No, never heard of him.
No one was willing to talk. It appeared that everyone feared Michael Stevenson.
Coming in now, or, well then, arrest me or, get the heck out of here.
After they found out who they were, they told me, expect the worst. I got very angry. My husband got angry. We said, no, this can't happen. I just wanted to go after them after that. I mean, that's all I thought about, was going after them.
In order to turn up leads for the police, Rose and a friend named Carol Jensen went undercover to infiltrate motorcycle gang hangouts.
I tried to dress like a biker person, a woman that's been around in the biker world. I wore my hair all wild and tight pants and tight jeans and heels and bracelets and I tried to look tough. It was scary, but I don't think I was afraid as I should have been.
What about you? You seen this guy?
No. We just let it be known that I had a loaded gun. It was not loaded, but we let him think it was, and that I would use it any moment to protect Rose.
Hey guys, what's happening?
Rose Hoffman spent hundreds of hours going to biker bars, different low-class establishments, soliciting information from informants, buying information when necessary. She followed up every lead which she shared with us. She and her daughters, family members, and friends covered the whole area, knocking on doors, talking to anybody that whose name they were given.
The witness is in the motorhome. She doesn't want you to know who she is, so she doesn't want you to speak face to face.
Rose hired a private investigator with connections to motorcycle gangs. He set up a meeting with a woman who claimed she knew what had happened to Gus.
I understand you have information about my son.
Yes, I do.
She told me that my
What
son was
happened?
dead. And she told me that my son was tortured. He was tortured for 3 to 5 days. And I begged her. I said, please, tell me who did it. You got to talk to the police. You got to talk to the police. I begged her. I offered her money. I said, I'll give you anything you want, anything. Please talk to the police and tell them. And anyway, the investigator, he just said no, there's no way he could let her talk. He said he just wanted her to let me know what happened to my son. And I begged him to. And he said, I can't. He said, I don't want to be responsible for her death.
Rose now felt she knew the horrible truth of what had happened to her son, but she had no hard evidence that could lead to an arrest.
I think they enticed him. I think they said, come on, let me see your bike, let me see your bike. And then he was like intimidated and said, well, because they're real rough, tough looking guys, real tough guys. And I think he was more intimidated into everything.
What are you guys chasing me for? I wasn't chasing you. You whipping out the chain on me, man.
And I think that once that he got off his bike, that was it. I think they wheeled the bike into the garage and then walked him into the garage. And when that garage door went down, he was never seen again. Never seen again.
On June the 19th, 1986, Michael Stevenson was killed during a failed extortion attempt. His death provided an unexpected break in the Hoffman case.
See if you've ever seen this man before.
With Stevenson dead, police re-questioned members of biker gangs and other possible witnesses.
Oh, yeah.
Now they talked, and they named names.
That's Michael Lee Stevenson.
It appears that Gus Hoffman was forced through intimidation to go to Mike Stevenson's residence in San Jose, was forced through intimidation to enter the garage. There were certain acts of violence against Gus Hoffman inside that garage, which ultimately resulted in his death and the disappearance of his motorcycle.
Police immediately arrested Michael Hodges, one of the men witnesses had linked to Gus's murder. Richard Dollar, a friend of Hodges, was picked up at San Quentin, where he was already serving time for a parole violation. The third remaining suspect, John Stell, was finally captured in Northern California. He was carrying a loaded handgun. Tragically, no trace of Gus Hoffman has ever been found. Rose Hoffman wants to give her son the dignity in death that he was denied at the end of his life. She hopes one of our viewers can help.
You can help me, as if anyone knows, if anybody knows where my son is. Please, I beg you, please tell the police or call me. I want my son. That's the most important thing.
On a previous broadcast, we brought you the story of a Los Angeles resident who one midnight last summer went to an automatic teller machine to make a cash withdrawal. He never returned home. On June 8, 1988, 22-year-old Matthew Chase left his house and drove to his bank a few blocks away. That night, a hidden camera took these photographs of an unknown man standing next to Matthew as he used the automatic teller machine.
The person standing next to Matt was somewhat shorter, somewhat stockier, and overall, he shouldn't have been in the photograph. No one is going to let someone stand that close to him while they're using an ATM machine where they can see the PIN number.
Police believe that Matthew was abducted in a robbery attempt and that this mysterious figure was his kidnapper.
Today, I sense that he's still alive, and that has kept us going, and we'll never stop looking for him until we find him, and I know we'll find him.
Over the next few months, Matthew's friends and family scoured Los Angeles, searching for the missing youth. They turned up nothing.
Los Angeles can be a dangerous place at night. We saw a lot of things that were very frightening, I think, and that only made it more real to us that something perhaps very serious had happened to Matt.
On March 29th, one chapter of this mysterious case came to a close when the Los Angeles coroner's office positively identified the body of Matthew Chase. His remains were discovered in a ravine in nearby Pasadena on September the 17th of last year, 3 months after he disappeared. Identification was delayed by the difficulty in tracking down dental records. The cause of death was a gunshot wound.
We had estimated that he had been down in this canyon area since the last week in June of last year to September when he was located. This case is being handled as a robbery homicide at this point. The man in the bank photograph is wanted for questioning in the disappearance and death of Matthew Chase.
This is an artist's rendering of the prime suspect in this case, based on computer enhancements of the bank photographs. Matthew's car was also stolen and later abandoned. The killer may have been seen driving this car in early June. It was a red two-door 1983 Volkswagen GTI. When this car was recovered, a blue bandana was found inside. It is thought the bandana may have belonged to the killer.
I do hope to find his killer. And I think that we need to see this through, and we will see it through, and this person must be brought to justice.
On May 21st, 1927, Charles Lindbergh electrified the world by being the first to fly non-stop across the Atlantic from New York to Paris.
All together, shout it now, there's no rock.
When he returned home, he received a hero's welcome. Ten days earlier, two French pilots, Charles Nungesser and François Colli, were preparing to beat Lindbergh across the Atlantic in their plane L'Oiseau Blanc, the White Bird. Their plan was to take off from an airfield near Paris and land their watertight plane in the New York harbor at the base of the Statue of Liberty. Nungesser was France's most decorated World War I pilot. Colli was the first man to fly non-stop across the Mediterranean. He had promised his wife that this would be his last adventure. As fate would have it, he kept his promise. The White Bird was last seen by escort planes as it crossed the coast of France and headed out over the vast reaches of the Atlantic. It was never seen again. Most experts assumed the plane simply crashed at sea. Nearly 50 years later, in 1971, Jim Reed, a local hunter, was deep in the remote woods of Maine when he came across a strange moss-covered mound.
I saw something that just didn't look right. I thought it was a boulder at first. And shortly thereafter, I went up and I probed around, and it was an engine, an aircraft engine. Well, I was a mechanic, and it was definitely not a diesel engine or an automobile engine. The cooling elements, the way it was built, it indicated to me it was an aircraft engine.
Jim Reed was never able to relocate the engine, although he made several attempts to retrace his steps through the dense woods. Could it have been the last remains of the White Bird, and proof that the French pilots actually crossed the Atlantic 2 weeks before Lindbergh?
It's very much like trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle. And little bit by little bit, the pieces come together and make a picture. And we have enough of a picture now to convince us that we're on to the trail.
Rick Gillespie and his wife, Pat Thrasher, are aircraft archaeologists who've been searching for the White Bird for over 4 years. They're so convinced the plane crashed in Maine, they've given up their jobs to devote their lives to search for the missing plane. After 50 years, most of the aircraft made of wooden fabric will have totally disintegrated, but they feel they are close. Using a helicopter equipped with an infrared scanner, the investigators surveyed the area near Machias, Maine, where the engine had been sighted.
Rick, we're about to come
They were hoping to find traces of metal that would indicate where the White Bird had crashed.
From the very beginning of this project, we felt that technology would be the answer. And we have driven ourselves nuts trying to find that technology. And time again, what has worked is people. People have succeeded. People have led us closer.
Rick and Pat concentrated their investigation on longtime Maine residents who might have seen or heard the White Bird 50 years ago. They visited a retired blueberry farmer who had lived in the area for 77 years.
I was outside, and all of a sudden, this plane was overhead.
You heard the aircraft?
I heard the airplane.
Harold Vining is the last person still alive who claims to have heard the white bird on its final flight.
At that time, we was all keyed up, listening for Lindbergh. Due to the fact that this plane was traveling in the wrong direction, it couldn't have been Lindbergh. I was out chopping wood when I heard this plane go over. I honestly believe that that's the first plane that I ever heard in my life. That's why it is so outstanding in my mind. Not knowing that it was these French people trying to make history, I just paid no attention to it.
3 miles from Harold Vining's home, a young couple, Everett and Abigail Scott, heard a plane and stopped their car to listen. 2 miles away, Mary Gould was in her kitchen when she too heard the sound of a plane.
It was real foggy for several days. I remember the day well.
Maurice Berry's cousin, Anson Berry, was fishing when he too heard a plane fly over, then heard its engine stop.
Anson said that he heard a ripping crash. I believed the man. I believed what he said. And I fully believe that that airplane is down there somewhere. You just haven't stumbled onto it.
The team searched one possible crash site near where the old-timers heard the plane. There they discovered an unusual piece of wood.
Hey, Pat! It turns out to be a single stalk of something that has been run through a roller, man-fashioned. The kind of generic material that would have been used for any kind of a padding purpose, but not in Maine, because it's not from Maine, and it's not even apparently from North America.
Eventually, they found 23 more fragments of the same strip. Together, they formed a length of 2 meters, the exact width of the white bird's wing.
We will continue on the project as long as it seems reasonable to do it. What has kept us going in the past has been that new information keeps coming out that corroborates what's come before. And there's very much a feeling of getting closer and closer and closer.
Watch the ground, watch your alignment.
Rick believes that there still may be a hunter who has spent time in the desolate woods near Machias, Maine, and who has seen some clue to the fate of the white bird. They intend to search until the ill-fated French plane is found. Only then will Nungesser and Coley be awarded their rightful place in the annals of aviation history. October 1987, Arlington, Texas. The friends and family of 43-year-old Patsy Bolton Wright mourned her tragic and unexpected death. She had died suddenly at 3 in the morning in her own bedroom, and no one knew why.
You would never, ever expect that to happen because, you know, I mean, she was so alive, she was so healthy. There was nothing wrong with her. And when it happened, you're just in awe because you would never, ever have expected that to happen to her.
There's not a day that goes by that we can even believe that this has happened. We can all, you know, still see Patsy coming into the room smiling, and we can hear her laugh, and, you know, it just doesn't seem real at all.
8 days after Patsy's memorial service, a routine autopsy was performed. A mass spectrometer checked for 56,000 different foreign substances in Patsy's blood samples. Suddenly, the machine showed a violent, positive reaction. The lab technician immediately requested identification. Within seconds, the chilling answer came back: strychnine. Because of its horrible side effects, strychnine poisoning is considered an unusually cruel way to die. Death by strychnine is also very rare. According to a leading toxicologist, since 1950, there's only been one confirmed case of homicide by strychnine poisoning in the entire United States. In the death of Patsy Wright, the Texas authorities faced a puzzling question. How had this virulent poison entered Patsy's bloodstream? 3 a.m., the morning of Patsy's death. Steve and Sally Horning were awakened by a frantic phone call.
Hello?
I need to talk to Sally.
What's the matter?
I can't breathe.
The caller was Sally's sister, Patsy Wright.
Hello, Patsy? I took some cold medicine. Something's really wrong.
What's the matter? What is it?
Patsy? Patsy?
We got to the house and parked in the driveway and went up to the front door. And, of course, the door was locked, and we couldn't get in.
Patsy! She's right in the back! Patsy! Open up! It's Sally!
I went around to the side. The window was open, just, I suppose, for getting fresh air in there. Opened it up, jumped through the window, came through, and I saw Patsy on the bed.
In the bedroom!
When we got in, she was in the bedroom. She just looked like she had kind of fainted, so I thought that's what had happened. And so we tried to get her up, and that didn't work.
Operator, we need an ambulance at 3017 Home Oak in Arlington immediately. My sister's not breathing.
I worked on both her heart and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. During that, a lot of green fluid came up from her, and I would continually spit that out onto the bed, or there was a towel there, as I remember. Sometime after that, the medics came.
When's the last time y'all talked to her?
About 3 o'clock this morning, and she just stopped talking to us. We think the phone dropped, and we rushed over here as quick as we could.
This way y'all found her? Yes.
We at first thought that she was responding because I could see the monitor going up and down, but it was every time they were pushing on her chest that's what it was.
Coming down. Down.
I rode to the hospital in the ambulance with her, and they said that they were not able to save her, and they said they had done everything they could do, and there just wasn't anything they could do.
Neither Sally nor the police had any reason to suspect foul play. But in her phone call, Patsy had mentioned taking cold medicine, so police collected the bottle for possible analysis. Patsy's cold medicine contained huge amounts of strychnine. The FBI ruled out product tampering. Patsy Wright seemed to have everything to live for. She had 2 children, a son Wayne and a daughter Leslie, to whom she was very close. Patsy and her sister Sally were successful businesswomen. They owned 2 wax museums worth over $6 million. Also, Patsy had just bought 3 prize quarter horses, and she planned to train them herself.
In my professional opinion, it's highly unlikely that Patsy committed suicide or was a high risk for suicide.
Sergeant J. Gustafson of the Arlington, Texas Police began to investigate Patsy's death as a murder. He had 2 clues which made him think that the murderer was probably someone Patsy knew very well. First, Patsy's burglar alarm had not been set on the night she died. Secondly, only those close to Patsy knew it was her habit to take nighttime gold medicine when she had trouble sleeping.
I can pretty much say that this case involves someone that knew Patsy, knew her habits, and then I have to put together motive and opportunity.
The first people Sergeant Gustafson questioned were Patsy's sister and brother-in-law, Sally and Steve Horning.
They started asking a lot of questions of all of us, and I guess we came to the realization that we were all, pretty much suspects, and they had to ask us some questions that, were not very comfortable, and, I don't ever want to go through that again.
The sergeant looked for a motive. Patsy's wealth came from the 2 wax museums she owned with her sister. Not only were the museum's tourist attractions, they were also centers of social life in their respective towns. When Patsy died, the museums were inherited by Steve and Sally Horning.
We as family members were being asked questions that you never even think you're ever going to be asked. So, surprise and hurt, and yet knowing that questions like these have to be asked.
Did you put that strychnine in Patsy's cold medicine?
No.
The authorities also speculated that if Steve Horning had poisoned Patsy, he would not have performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on her, taking potentially deadly liquid into his own mouth. Steve and Sally, along with other family members, voluntarily took polygraph tests. All of them passed. Police also gave Patsy's former boyfriend, Leo Fikes, a polygraph test.
He was one of the ones that would have been close enough to her to have known about her taking the liquid cold medicine on occasion. He was very much in love with Patsy, but for reasons from Patsy herself, she did not want to get remarried.
Do you know for sure who caused Patsy to be poisoned?
No. I had no fear of any questions. I had no fear of a polygraph test.
Regarding Patsy,
in realizing that I was a suspect. So I think the most difficult part of it for me was that Patsy had rejected me, and we had not been real close for 7 or 8 months prior to that. I'd seen her, been out with her 2 or 3 times, but there was a certain tenseness when we were together.
Leo Fikes passed his polygraph test. Patsy's ex-husband, Robert Cox, was another person questioned by the police. Patsy had obtained a restraining order against Cox during their separation because she claimed he was harassing her.
I had some people give me statements that Patsy had some fears of her ex-husband, Bob Cox. I understand that there are times that Patsy believed that Bob Cox had driven by or parked close to her house.
We knew that Patsy was going to be testifying against her second husband in an upcoming civil suit about a arson fire. And we knew that he had called her on number of occasions and asked her to change this or that story, and she had told him that she was going to tell the truth.
He was offered a polygraph test, the same as several others that I had interviewed and taken statements from, and he refused to take a polygraph test.
Robert Cox maintains his innocence, as does Leo Fikes, and there is evidence to suggest that neither of them is guilty. Next to Patsy's bed on the night she died were 2 empty dinner plates on a tray. It seems highly unlikely that Patsy would have spent an intimate evening with either Robert Cox or Leo Fikes. Could there have been an unknown visitor that night, intimate enough to know Patsy's personal habits and to share a late-night dinner with her? The day after Patsy died, her daughter Leslie received a strange phone call.
No, if she's not right now, I'm going to take a message. I said, hello, and this person asked for my mother. And I said, well, she's not here right now. You know, could I take a message? And this person persisted in wanting to talk with her. Well, she passed away yesterday. She said something to the effect that, well, good, I wanted her dead, or something like that. I don't know if it was a prank phone call, if it meant something. Maybe somebody wanted to find out if she had died by taking the cold medicine with the poison in it. You know, it could be totally unrelated. It could be related, I don't know.
The authorities are still convinced that the murderer is someone who knew Patsy well.
Appreciate it.
It's frightening because we do know that somebody knew her very well and knew her habits and was close enough to her to know how to get in and to use that cold medicine. So it is very frightening, and we are afraid that we do know the person pretty well.
It's a hard thing for, I guess, my brother and I, just from the point that this person knew her very well, and we obviously have to know them just because we were such a big part of my mother's life that we knew most of the people that she did know. And it's hard just because you don't really know who to trust anymore.
This is not unlike someone who wanted to set a trap out in the woods to trap something illegal. He knows what path the animal goes down. He knows if he sets a trap and walks away from it that he can be alone, he can be in a crowd of people when the trap goes off. What we've got is Patsy home alone. She decided to take medication that night, and that medication was like a trap. It was laced with strychnine poisoning.
In a moment, the story of an American oil tanker, the Nazi submarine that sunk her. Over 45 years later, the real story can finally be told. December 7th, 1941. On that day of infamy, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and the United States was thrust into World War II. In the Pacific, the Japanese claimed victory after victory. But in the Atlantic, the German Navy threatened the sea lanes in America's backyard. The German submarines, known as U-boats, even infiltrated the waters of New York Harbor and Chesapeake Bay. In 1941, 39-year-old William Betts, a father of 2 boys, was captain of the Muskogee, a tanker that transported crude oil up and down the Atlantic coast. The oil was vital to the burgeoning war effort. Because Betts had no time to go home to his family, Ellen, his wife, would go to him. On February 2nd, 1942, 2 months after Pearl Harbor, the Muskogee was preparing to leave its home port. William and Ellen exchanged what would be their final farewells. Ellen returned home to her sons and waited for word of her husband.
Are you Mrs. Betts? I have a telegram for Mrs. William Betts.
I received a telegram from the company saying that the ship was probably lost on its way north. And that is all they said. They didn't know anything.
Ellen had no idea what happened to her husband, the father of her 2 boys. 1 year later, the older son, George, was drafted into the military, but he remained haunted by his father's unknown fate. For 13 years, there was no clue. Then, in 1955, in a strange coincidence, a friend at work showed him a book about German submarines called the Sea Wolves, and George had his first clue as to what happened to his father.
It told of how this submarine, the U-123, as soon as they arrived in their battle zone, why they came upon the tanker Muskogee and sunk it. After I got done work that day, I hopped in my car and rode north to my mother's home to see if I could find out if that's where the Muskogee had come from, was Wilmington. And she said yes. I said, well, then I've just found out what happened to Dad's ship when it went down.
The Muskogee was just one of the 413 ships sunk by German U-boats in 1942. 29,000 merchant sailors lost their lives. Among them, the 34 missing mariners of the SS Muskogee. These are photographs taken from the deck of the German submarine, the U-123, only minutes after it torpedoed the Muskogee. They were taken by a German war correspondent and show 7 survivors from William Bett's ship. All 7 would perish at sea. These photographs took George Betts an important step closer to uncovering the complete story of his father's death. As George learned more about the last moments of the Muskogee, he began to develop a bond with this merchant marine captain he never really knew. By learning about his father's death, he was establishing a closeness they never shared in life.
Well, it was fascinating to see the pictures at last. And it made me feel closer to my dad's demise when I saw the pictures here in the book. I naturally looked to see if I could recognize my father on the raft, but I didn't see him there, and I could quite understand it because the basic rules of sea are that the captain sees that all able-bodied men are off the vessel before he leaves it. So therefore, I felt it was a safe assumption that my dad went down with his ship.
In 1979, George contacted the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and obtained a microfilm copy of German war records, including the captain's log of the U-123.
Of course, it was in German, but I could see the American name of the Muskogee ship sunk, and I could read some of the fact that the ship was being fired on. Then I could see where the Muskogee was on that plotting chart, and it would show the day, and he even had it marked on there like SS Muskogee gesunken, meaning they'd sunk the ship.
Captain REINHARD HARDEGAN commanded the U-123 through most of the war. He sunk 23 Allied ships totaling 200,000 tons and was personally congratulated by Adolf Hitler. Only 1 out of 10 U-boat personnel survived the war. REINHARD HARDEGAN was among them. After the war, he was elected to the West German Parliament and served 32 years. George began writing to Hardegan, and they agreed to meet in Canada.
And I was all for it. At long last, I thought, I'm now going to talk to this man. I had no animosity toward him. That's the way I felt. I felt here's one World War II veteran that was on one side and one World War II veteran that was on the other side. And in our cases, we were 2 of the lucky ones that survived the battles.
In October of 1987, the 2 met. REINHARD HARDEGAN gave George a chilling eyewitness report of the last moments of the Muskogee.
In the morning of the 22nd of March in 1942, I saw steam and some masts, and then I tried to get in front of the course of the ship. The ship was zigzagging a little bit of nearly 15 degrees to every side. After nearly 2 hours, I was in a good position, and then I dived. And then I shot a torpedo with my stern tube. This torpedo hit in the engine room of the tanker. Therefore, the tanker didn't burn, and she sank very quick. In a minute, it was all over, and it was too short for the crew to take lifeboats to the water, and therefore there were only 2 rafts. I gave the crew on the raft food and water, cigarettes, and told them the position. I thought the next day a ship will find the rafts. And so it was very sad information for me to learn from George Betts that no one of the crew was rescued.
Now that George knew the truth about the Muskogee, he was determined to let the families of the other crew members share in his knowledge. He managed to contact 8 families. In September of 1988, he drove over 200 miles to meet with the family of Clifford Chesley, the radio man of the Muskogee. Clifford was 26 when he perished at sea.
Now there's a picture of the ship going down from the deck, the bridge of the...
The Chesley family had no idea what had happened to Clifford. Thanks to George, for the first time, the Chesleys learned the fate of their loved one, 46 years earlier.
We just assumed that it was either a storm or something that the ship was missing.
Up till now, we didn't even know actually if it went down.
I mean, there were so many prisoner of wars and MIAs now. Could have happened the same thing back then.
One day I almost thought I saw him walking across the street. You know, they say everyone has a double. I almost ran over. And I just was wondering, you know, where he could be.
Now that I know, it definitely was the sinking of the boat, and it's gone. Definitely will relieve my mind to say, you know, my oldest brother, and that's how he's gone.
It's just a little more peace, that finally knowing what really did happen.
Of the 7 men in this photograph, 3 have been identified. They are third mate Nathaniel Foster, chief mate Morgan Finucane, and able-bodied seaman Anthony Sousa. The other 4 have never been identified, but they are among these 34 men who disappeared on board the Muskogee. Like so many brave men who served in the Merchant Marine, they died unheralded, unrecognized until now. Next week on Unsolved Mysteries, the story of a 16-year-old schoolgirl who vanished just yards away from her parents' home. A year later, she may have been 1,000 miles away in South Carolina. Then she disappeared again. Perhaps you can help find Carrie Lynn Nixon. Also, a fascinating treasure hunt in New Mexico. 50 years ago, a prospector discovered a maze of secret tunnels in a mountain, which he claimed led to an underground chamber filled with gold bars and priceless relics. Join me next week for another edition of Unsolved Mysteries.